Jordan said he was troubled by the growing violence between African Americans and police officers in this country. On Wednesday, MJ told ESPN's The Undefeated he will donate $1 million each to the Institute for Community Police Relations and the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. Jordan said he's making the donations to foster greater understanding, positive change, and create a more peaceful world. Here's a part of Jordan's statement. Quote, I am saddened and frustrated by the divisive rhetoric and racial tensions that seem to be getting worse as of late. I know this country is better than that, and I can no longer stay silent. We need to find solutions that ensure people of color receive fair and equal treatment, that police officers who put their lives on the line every day to protect us all are respected and supported. The problems we face didn't happen overnight, and they won't be solved tomorrow. But if we all work together, we can foster greater understanding, positive change, and create a more peaceful world for ourselves, our children, our families, and our communities. Here's Carmelo Anthony on Jordan speaking up.
I thought it was brilliant, and about time, you know, that he stepped up, said what he said, because he's, at the end of the day, amongst us, he is our face. I mean, he's a African American, a very powerful African American. So for him to step up in the midst of these times right now, it was very big on his behalf, and not also just step up. You know, it's not always about money and giving back, but for him to step up and put his money where his mouth at, I mean, the timing was perfect.
Stephen A., is Jordan taking too much heat for what he did?
I believe he is. You know, first of all, as a black man, would I have liked to have heard Jordan speak up more on issues a la Jim Brown, Bill Russell, Muhammad Ali, Kurt Flood, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, etc.? Of course. When you are a member of a community that's widely recognized as being a bit disenfranchised and who feels, by and large, most of the time, relatively voiceless, to some degree, even in this day and age, of course you want somebody of Michael Jordan's stature to speak, to be a bit more loquacious and outspoken about issues. But it's one thing to desire that he does those things and be those things. It's another thing entirely to engage in condemnation directly against him because you feel he hasn't, ignoring so many other things that he has done. I have always been told throughout the years, and to some degree, I've seen Michael Jordan be incredibly charitable, not just with his time, not just with his money, but also with providing the appropriate face to what you want someone of his stature to be about. Michael Jordan surrounds himself with individuals who are educated, who are intelligent, who are accomplished in their own professions, who also happen to be black. And there's a certain level, there's a certain requirement that he will have in terms of you putting your feet on the ground, pounding the pavement, and doing the things necessary to elevate yourself to another level. It's similar to the kind of thing that Kobe alluded to when he wrote that letter last week for the Players Tribune. And he talked about not necessarily just giving to people and playing the role of enabler, but instead putting them in positions so they can ultimately carry themselves, because you're not doing them favors when you're just handing stuff to folks without them having to position themselves to really work for it, develop a skill, and take themselves to another level. These are the kind of things I think need to be looked upon and thought about and elocuted when talking about Michael Jordan. I look at a man that not only was the greatest player in the world, I looked at how he dressed, I looked at how he carried himself, I looked at how he projected, because what I saw wasn't just an individual who was trying to look good or floss money or do something like that. I looked at Michael Jordan as an individual that was saying, this is what they taught me works in order to elevate myself to another level in the world of corporate America and beyond, which is what we're trying to do with our community. So look at me, to some degree, albeit as an example of some of the things that you could do along the way. I look at a guy like Kobe. I look at a guy like LeBron James. I look at D. Wade and all of these other guys, you know, with the fashion statements and all of this stuff. And LeBron having the business acumen that he has. And I see individuals that took it to another level. What Jordan had to fight through in the 80s, they didn't have to fight through at the turn of the millennial. He facilitated Melo and LeBron and D. Wade and others ultimately becoming what they became, him and Magic Johnson. Because when we see Magic Johnson, we thought Showtime in the 80s. Now we see the businessman. What the level of reverence that we should have for these individuals, there are no bounds to the words that I can express to thank them sincerely for all they've meant for our community. And when you see their good, there's no question that there are things they could have done better. But when you see their good, it so far outweighs the negative that on a day like yesterday, when the man announces what he has done, I felt not bad or negative towards anybody. I just found myself asking, why would we feel the need to sit there and look at him and say, about time? I understand that coming from pundits in the newspapers and beyond. I saw a really good column about it in the New York Daily News. But if you are a black man, how on that day yesterday could you say that about him?
Michael Jordan is, no one's ever been as good at anything as Michael Jordan was at basketball. Like, he's the great, it's, you know, indescribable how great he was. And kids who didn't grow up in that era will never even know, even though the statistical record he left behind also proves it, right? He was amazing. And I want to tell you something my late great brother Sam used to say. The time to criticize the fat person is not when they're getting back from the gym with the sweaty wristbands, right? I know what you mean when you say that, look, on this day, after he just made this statement and gave $1 million or $2 million altogether and tried to do it in a way that seems, at least on the surface, as a kind of unifying thing, now is when you criticize him? It's tough to find fault, really, with anything Jordan wrote or even with the way he allocated the money. And I saw Kevin Blackistone have a...
I saw it too.
Yeah, and the headline was basically Blackistone telling Jordan how he should spend his money. Why don't you give $1 million to Black Lives Matter? And my first thought was, and Kevin, my guy from around the horn back in the day, I love Kevin Blackistone. My first thought is, why do you have your hands in Michael Jordan's pocket? Let him, like, he's... what's it? But then I watched it, and Blackistone went ham. I highly suggest
everybody see it.
Yeah, you got to watch this video. I mean, he
Kevin
went
Blackistone around the horn yesterday.
Woo.
Yes.
There's just this feeling with Jordan. This is the best way I could describe it. Not to criticize the fat person. They're coming back from the gym. The wristbands are sweaty. There's just this feeling when you read it, like, boy, who could criticize what he wrote or what he did? It's impossible. And then you step back and you go, maybe that's why I have this funny feeling. Because I can't exactly, Blackistone did a very good job of figuring it out, but I couldn't articulate to myself what gave me a kind of a funny feeling. And I guess that's what it was. That with Michael Jordan, you get the sense that no one could ever be offended. You know, my reaction to the headline about Blackistone originally was, who could be offended by what Jordan said or did? And then yeah, that's right. You can't be offended by what he said or did, I guess. And that's what the issue is. It feels like you're dealing with a professional politician in Jordan. And this is, though he has a lofty status, and he has a major impact in the business world, I understand, and partly as a result, a major cultural impact, you still get the feeling that his response, when you watch Carmelo, you get the feeling that his response is a human and compassionate response, a real response. And with Jordan, you get the feeling like it's still somehow political, even in its apolitical nature. It still feels like it's too clean, like no one could possibly take exception, and that's the point.
A friend of mine, he's a DEA agent. He wrote something. Just want to read this to you for a quick second, because this is relevant to what we're talking about. He said, MJ and others speaking up or throwing money at the problem isn't the issue. The law protects the PD officers, police department officers, for what ultimately, in some cases, amounts to murder. And that has to change. He's not calling all officers murderers. He's not doing anything like that. He's saying that in cases when that has taken place, which has basically fueled Black Lives Matters and other things, he said the law has to change. The reason I bring that up is because it's incredibly important to know that when you saw Blackstone yesterday going ham and going in, and all of his points were salient. If you know anything about Kevin Blackstone, there's nothing but respect. The man's a columnist, Dallas Morning News for years. The man is phenomenal at a lot of different things. He's a good man. But the reason I bring up and why I respectfully disagree, even though I'm not disagreeing with any of his points, you're using the past to get on Michael Jordan now about what he should have done. No matter what way we want to slice it, people are looking at what Jordan didn't do in the past. But had Jordan done those things in the past, he wouldn't be the Jordan he is now in all likelihood, and therefore wouldn't be in a position to provoke change and bring attention to things now the way that he can. You make that choice. It was a different time, and everybody couldn't be Allen.
Just like partly as a result of social media and the democratization of media as a result, there's now an atmosphere, there's now a climate that allows Carmelo Anthony and LeBron James and Chris Paul and others and Dwayne Wade and others to take kind of this public righteous stand.
Yes.
In Jordan's time, the circumstances were not as conducive to it. So if he wanted to get to this level, he had to play ball in a sense.
I have a question for you. Was the criticism based on the message that it was inauthentic and somehow some political or business motives, or more the timing, that it was too late?
I think it was a combination of both. I think that equally, it's the fact that people feel he should have stepped up a long time ago. And to some degree, because of what Max articulated, how it just seemed so safe. Because how could either side disagree with anything that he had to say? There are some critics that are going to look at it that way in terms of having a problem with it. Here's why they'll have a problem with it. They'll have a problem with it because they'll say, if nobody has a problem with what you're saying, then what risk have you really taken? And if you're not willing to take that risk, why can't you? You're set for life, blah, 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 blah. And I'm saying everyone isn't meant to articulate and elocute their points of view. Everybody doesn't have that gift. Everybody doesn't have that comfort level. Jordan may very well be very, very comfortable working behind the scenes and making things happen that way. Some people swear that's what he's done. Someone like Oprah was comfortable doing both. Oprah put her money where her mouth was, but she wasn't afraid to put her mouth where her money was. And so because of that, everybody's different. In the end, ultimately, what we must grow as a community, in my opinion, to ask ourselves is this question. Are you an asset or are you a liability? Are you making a contribution or are you not? If you are making a contribution and you are an asset, what's the moaning about?
So in other words, if you're making a contribution, then the criticism shouldn't be how much of a contribution you're making.
Right.
The fact is you're on the plus side of the ledger.
You're on the plus side of the ledger.
I like that, and that's my basic reaction to what Jordan did, and yet I get what Blackstone is talking about, and I understand that funny feeling. It's very difficult to go through life on the level that Jordan is going through life and seemingly not offend anybody. It doesn't feel genuine. And there's something about Jordan, who was the most authentic player, who, I mean, like, he was himself, but off the court that feels, that felt less authentic than some of the other people you mentioned, certainly during the 60s and early 70s when the climate was much different.
But hindsight is always easy. You know, listen, we're very good at telling people what they should have done after they've done something. Maybe if somebody had come to Jordan and others and made specific suggestions prior to that, something else.
You know what the other problem is, though? He followed, when you really talk about the psychology of this country, he followed Muhammad Ali. Like the next icon on the level of not that anyone's on Ali's level, but on a global level like that, apologies to Bird and Magic and everybody else, you know, was Michael Jordan. he was really the next Ali when you think about it in a global way. And that's a tough act to follow.
Right.
I mean, because Ali was the polar opposite.
That's right. But everybody ain't meant to lead, especially in that particular situation. You lead in your comfort zone. It's far more difficult to do it when you're away from your comfort zone.
Of course, and speaking of assets, no one more powerful than Michael Jordan. So even though it's now, we're happy he's behind it, and hopefully this will provoke some change.